Hi, everybody, and welcome to our final chapter, Chapter 14, on assessment and evaluation. So all jobs have to be evaluated for success and productivity. And in order to evaluate, we have to define what that is, and that's going to be to appraise or to determine the value of one's performance. Are you producing? Are you producing on the job things that will accomplish the goals and missions of an organization? If we don't have evaluation, we have no idea how individuals are performing. We don't know if teams are doing what we intended them to do, or departments and agencies are thriving or not. So assessment is an important part of organizational duties. So there are many different kinds of assessment. We're going to start talking about a few here. So the first is going to be the line inspection, and this is a day-to-day inspection of appearance. Officers need to appear clean and orderly in their uniforms to represent the agency well and to establish the agency. And they will, take the line inspection. The supervising officer will go through, make sure everything looks as it should. There are spot inspections, which are unannounced or surprise inspections to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing as is expected on the job. This is the kind of approach where people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're going to get caught with their pants down, so to speak, by supervisors, and it's not a good thing. There are staff inspections, and this is very similar to the line inspection. So it's proactive to keeping order and professionalism alive and kicking in the organization, and to make sure that policies are being executed properly, to make sure that resources are going where they're supposed to be and intended to be, and to discover if there are any possible deficiencies. So these inspections are proactive so that they can identify problems before they become bigger problems. Performance appraisals are formal evaluations of officer performance, and this is usually going to revolve around some sort of formal metric, some kind of paperwork that has different criteria that's been pre-established for the determination of success or less than success in executing your duties. There are informal evaluations, which are much more relaxed, and it's going to be much more of a sort of just a verbal give and take. It's not going to be put on paper. It's not going to be a very, formal process. It's going to be like, hey, these are the things you're doing really well, and here are some areas where we'd like to see some growth and development. In order for evaluation to occur, when we've talked about this in previous chapters, standards and expectations of performance have to be made public. Literally, if officers don't know what's expected of them, how could they possibly meet those standards and expectations? So those things those policies, those procedures, those expectations, rules, all of that has to be made public and available to the officers so they can live up to them. There's also fitness for duty evaluations. There's going to be both physical and psychological fitness for duty evaluations in order to remain active duty. So the first is going to be, the physical fitness expectation. Policing is a very physical job, right? It's you're going to be running, you're going to be picking people up, you're going to be lifting, you're going to be prying car doors open. There's all sorts of things you're going to be doing. And lacking in this area, not maintaining physical fitness, not maintaining a state of health, threatens your ability to successfully execute your job. Both, and that'll impact both the public, it'll impact your fellow line officers, and it's going to impact your own safety as well. This is something that is heavily emphasized when people start in law enforcement. Certainly to get through basic training at an academy, there are always physical requirements. There's always physical therapy that is mandated. For some reason, it is not consistently required throughout the course of a career. I've never understood that. If they're, what's the point of having it at the beginning if you're not going to maintain it? But certainly it is something that officers want to maintain. There's also psychological fitness, and this is a requirement for active duty. If somebody's psychologically compromised or unwell, whether that's mental illness, whether it's just experiencing severe trauma like an on-the-job shooting or something of that ability, it inhibits the officer's ability to do their work, to make snap decisions, to be confident in the decisions that they're making, to recognize and have clear situational awareness. Excuse me, that they need about them in order to do their job and recognize when there's a problem or something amiss. So psychological fitness is of utmost importance. So what are some problems and challenges with assessing work performance? So there's a few things that we have to ask ourselves anytime we do an assessment, especially if we're using a formal assessment tool. People build these assessment tools, but they're made by people, which means they're flawed. And sometimes people just crank out a first draft and they're like, okay, here it is, but they don't do sort of any review or evaluation of the assessment. And it's very important that you do. First and foremost, the first question you want to ask is, does the assessment measure what it's supposed to measure? Right? Are the questions we're asking, the categories, the things we're evaluating on, is it measuring performance, or is it measuring something, something else, something unnecessary? Is the assessment valid? And are the people who are making the assessment properly trained to be able to do so? Do they know how to properly assess someone's performance? Is the assessment representative? So if you only get one assessment per year, right, you're getting assessed, your performance is getting assessed every 12 months. Well, there's a lot between, this month and the next 12 months that happens that's just simply going to get missed, right? If we just do it one time per year. And frequently what we see is the last month closest to the assessment is what is demonstrated in the assessment. So we want to make sure that it's really representative of the entire picture, not just a short period of time. We want to avoid, as people who are doing the evaluations and the assessments, we want to avoid what we call the halo effect and the horn effect. The halo effect is that if someone is above average in performance in one area, the rater tends to just make an assumption that they're above average in all areas, or just sort of automatically ascribe that success to all areas, rather than critically assessing and saying, here's the areas that you're really, really strong in, but you know what, this one over here, you could spend some time focusing on this and refining it. This is versus the halo, or excuse me, the horn effect. And this is when one negative trait of an individual's performance gets blanketed over the entire assessment. So maybe, you have one area that's it's a decent weakness, it's sizable, it's noticeable. We want to make sure as evaluators, we're not generalizing that to all of your skills, because there are things over here that you are performing well. We don't want to just blanket the entire thing and be like, everything you does sucks because of this one thing, right? We really want to critically assess and critically evaluate, identify strengths, identify weaknesses, and communicate those for improvement. You also want to ask whether or not you're rating their performance, or are you rating personality, right? People are human beings. Not everybody gets along. Not everybody likes everybody. Am I giving you a poor rating because I don't like you, because you irritate me? Or am I giving you a poor rating because you don't do your job? Right? Or am I giving you a good rating because we get along so well and we're such great friends, but maybe you don't do your job, right? You have to be aware of those things and cognizant of those biases as somebody who does the assessments and the evaluations, because remember, at the end of the day, to use a tired phrase, this is about safety and efficiency, right? So if I really like you and I'm just giving you scores A across the board, but you're not proficient in the use of your firearms, I'm putting you at danger. I'm putting the community at danger. Criticism is not necessarily a bad thing. It's an identification of areas that simply need more remediation, more training, more education, more improvement. So make sure that you're rating performance, not personality. There's also rater bias, which we talked about in previous chapters. Make sure that you're cognizant of your own personal biases and that you don't let them sneak in to negatively influence your assessment. And finally, who benefits from the assessment? Everyone, the entire organization. The individual benefits because they've identified things that need work on. Maybe you knew those things needed work. Maybe it's identified some things you were unaware that you were doing insufficiently. You had no idea, right? And if somebody doesn't identify it, you can't begin to work on it and focus on it. So the individual is going to benefit, but so too are all of your colleagues. The better you do your job, the easier it is for them to do their job. Certainly the same is true for your supervisors. The greater performance you provide, the less negative work they have to do, and the organization as a whole benefits. In order for evaluations to mean anything, they must be substantive. So we can have an evaluation and I can tell you that you're doing great, or I can tell you that you're not doing great. But if there is no follow-up, there's no outcome to that assessment, it really has no teeth. It's meaningless. So if I'm telling you that you're doing great consistently, I can't just tell you that for 5 years and keep you right here where you are. If I'm telling you that you are consistently performing above standards, well, there should be a promotion in your future, right? Because why else then? What other incentive do you have to continue performing above the objective standards and the requirements? Similarly, if you're not doing well, and let's say you're having trouble with something, let's say you're having trouble with, I don't know what, anything at all, we engage in remediation, right? Which is identifying those problems and providing instruction and training, right? That it's everybody has weaknesses, everybody has things that they're not great at, and that's not shameful or embarrassing. We just simply identify them and we shore it up with as much training as we can to strengthen those areas. And finally, termination is an option, of course, that if I'm consistently providing assessment that you're not doing your job, that you're, you know, using excessive force, you're not responsibly handling firearms, et cetera, et cetera. If I do that for 5 years, you're not going to change because I've never done anything with teeth, and that's where termination comes in.